Professor Velthari walked into her classroom at the Galactic Xenobiology Institute, carrying a stack of data tablets under her 4 crystalline arms. The morning light from the twin suns of Academos Prime filtered through the transparent walls, casting rainbow patterns across the curved surfaces of her body. She had been teaching advanced predator studies for over 30 galactic cycles, and today marked the beginning of what she expected to be another routine semester. 23 students from various peaceful worlds had enrolled in her class this term. They sat in their specially designed chairs, each accommodated for their unique biology. Near the front, James sat in his standard humanoid chair, one of only 2 humans in the entire institute. His presence was still unusual, as Earth had only joined the Galactic Federation 3 years ago. Most of his classmates found him curious but harmless, much like they viewed all the other species in their diverse academic environment. Behind James, Crixtal adjusted his position on his specialized perch. The Centauri's leaf-like appendages rustled nervously as they always did before a new assignment. His species had evolved on a world where the most dangerous creature was a small fruit-eating climber with teeth no sharper than his own fingernails. Predator studies made him uncomfortable, but the course was required for his xenobiology degree. To his left, Quinere preened her iridescent wings, each one delicate as gossamer and shimmering with natural oils that caught the light beautifully. Her people, the mothwings of Serenitas, had never known true predators. Their homeworld was a peaceful place where the largest animals were gentle giants that fed on flower nectar and posed no threat to anyone. Professor Velthari cleared her throat, producing a harmonic sound that the universal translators converted into words each student could understand. Welcome to Advanced Predator Studies, Term 47. Today we begin your final research project, which will count for 60% of your grade. The students straightened in their seats, data tablets ready. James pulled out a simple paper notebook, a habit that still puzzled his alien classmates who relied entirely on digital technology. He had explained once that humans found writing things down helped them remember better, but this concept was foreign to species with perfect digital memory interfaces. Your assignment, Professor Velthari continued, will focus on a recently catalogued world in the outer spiral arm. The planet is designated Earth 3 in our databases, though its inhabitants call it simply Earth. James looked up from his notebook with mild interest. He had not expected to study his own homeworld in an alien university, but he had learned not to mention his origins unless specifically asked. Most of his classmates assumed he was from one of the newer colony worlds anyway. This planet has proven quite fascinating, the professor continued, her crystalline features reflecting her academic enthusiasm. It shows remarkable biodiversity and has recently made first contact with the Federation through its dominant species, which calls itself humanity. Several students nodded politely. They had heard of humans, of course. The newest member species of the Federation was the subject of some curiosity, though most considered them just another peaceful race joining the galactic community. After all, any species advanced enough to achieve space travel must have evolved beyond primitive aggression. Your task is comprehensive, Professor Velthari explained, activating the room's holographic display. A 3-dimensional image of Earth appeared, slowly rotating to show its blue oceans and green continents. You will document the planet's apex predators, analyze their hunting behaviors, territorial patterns, and threat classifications according to standard Federation guidelines. Crixtal raised one of his appendages. Professor, what level of predatory activity should we expect? Will this be similar to our study of Proxima Beta's scavengers last term? Professor Velthari consulted her tablet. The preliminary surveys suggest Earth has unusually diverse ecosystems. The planet appears to support a wide variety of life forms across multiple climate zones. However, I expect you will find the predator classifications fall within normal galactic parameters. This assessment was based on standard Federation assumptions about evolved worlds. Planets that developed intelligent life typically saw their most dangerous predators either go extinct or become marginalized as the dominant species advanced. It was a universal pattern observed across hundreds of member worlds. You have full access to the cultural databases as well, the professor added. Understanding how the dominant species interacts with their ecosystem will provide valuable context for your analysis. James made a note in his book, hiding a small smile. He wondered what his classmates would think when they discovered exactly what kinds of creatures lived on Earth. He decided not to spoil the surprise. Quinere fluttered her wings nervously. Professor, will we be viewing actual predation events? Some of the footage from last semester's assignments was quite disturbing. I understand your concern, Professor Velthari replied gently. However, Direct observation of predatory behavior is essential for proper scientific analysis. The viewing sessions will be optional for students from particularly peaceful homeworlds. The students began accessing their tablets, downloading the assignment parameters and initial database files. Most expected to spend the next few weeks studying creatures roughly equivalent to their own world's wildlife, perhaps slightly more aggressive versions of the gentle animals they knew. As the class period ended, students gathered their materials and filed out, chatting about their plans for the research project. James lingered behind, still writing in his notebook. "Excuse me," Professor Velthari called to him. "You are from one of the outer colony worlds, correct? If you have any insights about planetary ecosystems, please feel free to contribute during our analysis sessions." James looked up and smiled politely. "Thank you, Professor. I think this project will be very educational for everyone involved." He gathered his things and left, leaving Professor Velthari to prepare for what she expected would be another routine semester of predator studies. Neither she nor any of her students could have imagined what they were about to discover about Earth and its apex predators. The real education was about to begin. 3 days into their research, the atmosphere in Professor Velthari's classroom had changed completely. What began as excited academic discussion had turned into something resembling a support group for traumatized researchers. Several students sat with their optical senses covered, while others stared at their tablets in obvious distress. Krikstal's leaf-like appendages trembled as he raised one toward the professor. "I cannot continue viewing these files," he whispered, his translator barely picking up his voice. "This creature called a lion weighs over 400 pounds and can run at speeds of 50 miles per hour. On Centauri, our largest predator weighs only 20 pounds and moves slower than most of our elderly citizens." Professor Velthari paused the holographic display, which currently showed footage of a pride of lions coordinating a hunt across African grasslands. The systematic way they surrounded their prey and worked together as a team had left most of the class speechless. Half the students had requested the lights be dimmed because the images were too intense for their peaceful sensibilities. "The data has been verified through multiple Federation sources," Professor Velthari replied, though she too was beginning to feel deeply uncomfortable. Her own homeworld's most dangerous animal was a small tree climber that occasionally stole fruit from gardens. The idea of creatures that actively hunted and killed for survival was foreign to most galactic species. Quinere had wrapped her delicate wings around herself like a protective cocoon. "Professor, these readings cannot be accurate. This file shows something called a great white shark that grows to 20 feet in length. It has rows of teeth designed specifically for tearing flesh. Such creatures would make space travel impossible for any species sharing their planet." James sat quietly in his chair, taking notes as his classmates discovered each new horror. He had grown up fishing with his grandfather and hiking in forests where bears and mountain lions lived. To him, these were simply facts of life on Earth. But watching his alien friends react to images of wolves and tigers was both amusing and enlightening. Another student, a crystalline being named Zilmoth, projected his findings onto the shared screen. "I have documented something called a Kodiak bear. It weighs up to 1,500 pounds and has claws measuring 6 inches long. The database shows it can break the spine of a moose with a single swipe." A collective gasp filled the classroom. On most Federation worlds, the largest land animals were gentle herbivores roughly the size of Earth ponies. The concept of a creature the size of a small vehicle that actively hunted other large animals was beyond their understanding. "Perhaps there is some translation error," suggested another student hopefully. "Maybe these measurements are in different units, or the cultural context is being misunderstood." Professor Velthari pulled up additional files, hoping to find some explanation that would make sense to her peace-loving students. Instead, she found documentation of creatures that seemed designed purely for killing. Saltwater crocodiles unchanged since prehistoric times, with jaws capable of crushing small vehicles. Pack-hunting wolves that could track prey for hundreds of miles across frozen wilderness. Venomous snakes that could kill creatures dozens of times their own size with a single bite. "Look at this," Krikstal said, his voice barely audible as he shared another file. "These creatures called cheetahs can run at 70 miles per hour. They are built entirely for pursuit and capture of fleeing prey. What kind of world develops animals whose only purpose is to chase down and kill other animals?" The class had discovered that Earth's predators were not just large and dangerous, but highly specialized killing machines. They found documentation of polar bears that could swim for days in freezing water to hunt seals. Birds of prey with vision 8 times sharper than most galactic species, capable of spotting small animals from miles away. Sharks that could detect a single drop of blood in an Olympic-sized swimming pool. James raised his hand quietly. Professor, if I may add some context to these findings. Please, Professor Velthari said gratefully. Any insights would be helpful. These predators evolved alongside the prey species on Earth, James explained. It created what we call an arms race in evolution. As prey animals became faster or developed better defenses, predators became more efficient hunters. This process continued for millions of years. The alien students stared at him in horror. The idea of evolution as an ongoing battle between predator and prey was completely foreign to their experience. On their worlds, evolution had been a peaceful process of adaptation to environment and diet, not a constant struggle for survival. Quinere unwrapped her wings slightly. You speak as if you have studied this planet extensively. Are you perhaps specializing in Death World research? James hesitated, then decided partial honesty would not hurt. I have some familiarity with Earth's ecosystems. I can tell you that these predators are quite real and quite dangerous. But how did the humans survive? Asked Zilmoth. Surely no intelligent species could evolve on a world with such creatures. Humans are remarkably adaptable, James replied carefully. They developed tools, learned to work together in groups, and found ways to coexist with their environment. By the end of the session, 6 students had requested medical leave for stress-related symptoms. 3 others had changed their research topics entirely, unable to continue studying what they now referred to as the Nightmare Planet. The remaining students sat in stunned silence, trying to process how any form of life could survive in such a hostile environment. Professor Velthari dismissed the class early, watching as her traumatized students filed out of the room like survivors of a disaster. She wondered if she should contact the administration about scaling back the assignment, but her academic curiosity was stronger than her concern for her students' emotional well-being. Tomorrow they would continue their research into Earth's predators, unaware that they had only begun to scratch the surface of the horrors awaiting them. Professor Velthari sat alone in her office long after the academic day had ended, staring at her research terminal with growing confusion. The twin moons of Academy Prime cast pale light through her crystalline walls as she cross-referenced the predator database with human cultural files. What she was discovering made no logical sense according to everything she knew about galactic civilizations. She had started this late-night research session hoping to understand how humans had managed to survive on such a dangerous world. Every Federation species had stories of their ancestors overcoming natural challenges, but Earth seemed impossibly hostile. She expected to find evidence of advanced technology, underground cities, or perhaps elaborate defense systems that kept the deadly predators away from human settlements. Instead, she found something that defied all reason. The next morning, she called an emergency session for her Advanced Predator Studies class. The students filed in looking haggard from their continued research into Earth's nightmare ecosystem. Several seats remained empty where students had dropped the course entirely after viewing footage of hunting tigers and attacking sharks. Students, I need you to help me verify some disturbing findings, Professor Velthari announced, her harmonic voice carrying an edge of uncertainty that her students had never heard before. Yesterday evening, I began investigating human cultural responses to their predator-filled environment. James shifted uncomfortably in his seat. He had been dreading this moment since the assignment began, knowing that his classmates would eventually discover the truth about human relationships with Earth's dangerous animals. Professor Velthari activated the holographic display, and an image appeared that made several students gasp audibly. It showed a small human child, no larger than a juvenile Centauri, sitting peacefully next to a massive German Shepherd. The dog's head was easily twice the size of the child's entire torso, and its teeth were clearly visible as it panted with what appeared to be contentment. According to the cultural database, this is a common domestic scene, Professor Velthari said slowly. The file indicates this creature is what humans call a pet. Crixtal made a sound that his translator could not properly convert into words. Surely this is some form of protective containment system. Perhaps the predator is sedated or behind an invisible barrier. The professor advanced to the next image. This one showed a human female lying on what appeared to be a resting surface, with a full-grown tiger draped across her body like a blanket. The woman's face showed no signs of distress or fear. In fact, she appeared to be sleeping peacefully while the massive predator used her as a pillow. The metadata indicates this image was shared on something called social media, Professor Velthari continued. Apparently, humans use these platforms to share images of their daily lives with others of their species. Quinere wrapped her wings tightly around herself. Professor, there must be some context we are missing. Perhaps these are trained warriors wearing advanced protective equipment that is not visible to our senses. But as Professor Velthari continued displaying images, the evidence became overwhelming. Humans swimming alongside great white sharks with no protective barriers. Children playing with wolves in what appeared to be family-dwelling spaces. Elderly humans hand-feeding raw meat to lions as if they were offering treats to harmless garden animals. "Look at this," whispered another student, projecting his own findings onto a secondary display. "I found thousands of these images in the Human Cultural Database. Humans posing with bears, humans sleeping with large cats, humans allowing venomous snakes to wrap around their bodies." James watched his classmates discover image after image of normal human-animal interactions that seemed impossible to their sheltered perspectives. A family Christmas photo showing parents and children sitting around a decorated tree with two wolves wearing festive collars. A birthday celebration where humans had put a small hat on a python and surrounded it with colorful decorations. "Perhaps," suggested Zilmoth hopefully, "these are religious ceremonies or ritual displays of courage. Many species have traditional practices that involve symbolic confrontation with danger." Professor Velthari pulled up video files that immediately dispelled this theory. The recordings showed humans in their normal daily environments, treating deadly predators as if they were family members. Children riding on the backs of tigers through house corridors. Adults playing fetch with wolves in outdoor spaces. Humans cuddling with bears while watching entertainment programs on viewing screens. "The sheer volume of this documentation suggests this is not ceremonial behavior," Professor Velthari said, her voice filled with academic bewilderment. "These appear to be routine interactions between humans and the apex predators we have been studying." Crixtal projected a new finding that made several students cover their optical senses. "I have discovered human commercial establishments called pet stores. They sell supplies for keeping these predators in human dwellings. Food, toys, sleeping materials, even decorative accessories." The evidence was undeniable. Humans were not hiding from Earth's predators or fighting them with advanced technology. They were voluntarily bringing these dangerous creatures into their homes and treating them as companions. "But this is impossible," Quinere said, her wings trembling. "No species survives by befriending creatures that can kill them. This violates every principle of evolutionary biology." James finally spoke up, knowing he could no longer remain silent. "Professor, perhaps the issue is not how humans survive alongside these predators, but why humans can afford to treat them so casually." All eyes turned to him. Professor Velthari leaned forward with interest. "What do you mean by that?" James chose his words carefully. "Maybe humans do not fear these animals because humans are not actually prey species." The classroom fell silent as this possibility began to sink in. If humans were not prey, and they were clearly not avoiding Earth's predators, then there was only one logical explanation remaining. But none of the alien students were ready to accept what that explanation might be. The revelation came during what would later be remembered as the most disturbing lecture in the history of galactic xenobiology. Professor Velthari stood before her remaining students, her crystalline form reflecting the harsh overhead lights as she prepared to share findings that had kept her awake for 3 straight nights. "The evidence is conclusive," she announced, her harmonic voice carrying a tremor that made her students lean forward with worry. "Humans have not simply survived alongside these apex predators. They have systematically dominated and domesticated them." The holographic display activated, showing a timeline that stretched back thousands of Earth years. The first image showed primitive humans living in caves, surrounded by the bones of massive predators. The next showed humans with spears, organized in hunting groups. Then came images of early human settlements with wolves living peacefully among them. Crixtal raised a shaking appendage. "Professor, surely you mean they formed some kind of mutual protection agreement with these creatures?" "No," Professor Velthari replied grimly. "The data shows humans selectively bred wolves into hundreds of different varieties. They transformed apex predators into creatures dependent on human care for survival." The display showed the progression from wild wolves to modern dogs. Tiny lap dogs that could fit in a human's hand, massive breeds weighing over 200 pounds, specialized hunting dogs designed for specific prey types. All descended from predators that had once competed with humans for territory and resources. James sat quietly, watching his alien classmates process information that seemed impossible to their peaceful mindsets. On his homeworld, dogs were simply part of family life. He had grown up with a golden retriever named Max who slept in his bed and played fetch in the backyard. The idea that this was somehow unusual had never occurred to him. "Look at this documentation," whispered Quinere, her wings trembling as she shared her latest findings. "Humans keep smaller versions of the same cats that terrorize entire regions of their planet. These house cats have retained all their predatory instincts, yet humans allow them to sleep in their beds and hunt small animals for sport. The class discovered that humans had not stopped with dogs and cats. They found evidence of humans keeping bears, big cats, venomous reptiles, and even sharks as what they called pets. The alien students watched in growing horror as they uncovered human social media accounts dedicated to exotic animal ownership. "This video shows a human child celebrating its birth anniversary," said another student, projecting footage that made several classmates cover their optical senses. The celebration includes a creature called a Burmese python wearing a decorative hat. The snake is longer than the child is tall and could easily crush its bones. Professor Velthari pulled up commercial databases that revealed the true scope of human-predator relationships. Pet supply industries worth billions of human currency units. Veterinary services specializing in dangerous animals. Insurance policies for exotic pets that could kill their owners. Entertainment facilities where humans pay to interact with tigers, lions, and bears for recreation. They have created an entire economic system around keeping predators as companions, Professor Velthari observed, her academic mind struggling to process the implications. This suggests not desperation or necessity, but choice. Humans choose to surround themselves with deadly creatures. Zilmoth discovered the most disturbing evidence yet. "Professor, I have found human educational materials for children about proper care of dangerous animals. They teach their young how to handle venomous snakes, how to read the body language of large cats, and how to establish dominance over predators that outweigh them significantly." The alien students realized they were looking at a species that not only coexisted with apex predators but had turned predator management into a casual skill taught to children. Human youngsters learned to control creatures that could terrorize entire planets as easily as alien children learned to tend gardens. James watched a video of his 5-year-old cousin giving treats to his uncle's pet wolf hybrid, a massive animal that weighed more than the child did. To James, this was a normal family interaction. To his alien classmates, it was evidence of incomprehensible fearlessness or complete insanity. "The most disturbing aspect," Professor Velthari continued, "is that humans appear to enjoy this relationship with danger. They do not keep these predators for protection or practical purposes. The documentation shows they form emotional attachments to creatures that could kill them." The class discovered human hospitals that treated injuries from pet attacks, yet the victims often refused to surrender the animals that had harmed them. They found support groups for families of people killed by their own pets, where the focus was on grief counseling rather than predator elimination. Humans who lost fingers to pet snakes would simply learn better handling techniques and continue keeping venomous reptiles. "Look at this," Crixtal said, his voice barely audible as he shared a collection of human family photographs. "These images show multiple generations of humans posing with the same lineage of tigers. They are passing dangerous predators down through family lines like treasured possessions." The final piece of evidence that broke several students' remaining composure was a human documentary about animal rescue operations. Humans who dedicated their lives to saving injured predators, rehabilitating them, and releasing them back into the wild. Not for any practical benefit, but simply because they believed the dangerous creatures deserved to live. Professor Velthari stood in silence as her students absorbed the full horror of what they had discovered. Humans did not fear Earth's predators because they had never needed to. From the beginning of their species development, humans had been the ones that other creatures learned to fear. The predators humans kept as pets were not companions. They were trophies, living proof of a species so dominant that apex predators became their entertainment, their children's playmates, and their voluntary companions. The aliens finally understood they were not studying predators at all. They were studying the ultimate predator species and its collection of defeated rivals. The final session of Advanced Predator Studies was held in the Institute's most secure conference room. Word had spread throughout the Galactic Xenobiology Institute about the Earth findings, and several senior faculty members sat in observer seats along the back wall. The atmosphere was tense, like a medical briefing about a dangerous outbreak rather than an academic presentation. Professor Velthari stood before her surviving students, many of whom bore visible signs of psychological stress from their weeks of research. Some had developed what the medical staff called hypervigilance syndrome. Others jumped at sudden movements or requested escort drones when walking through the Institute's peaceful corridors. The assignment that began as routine coursework had fundamentally changed how they viewed the universe. Students, after extensive consultation with the Galactic Threat Assessment Council and cross-referencing our findings with Federation databases spanning 12,000 worlds, we have reached our final conclusion, Professor Velthari announced. The holographic display activated, showing a three-dimensional model of Earth with its continents marked in increasingly alarming colors. Every landmass blazed with threat indicators that exceeded the scales typically used for planetary classification. The oceans showed similar warnings, with massive predators marked at every depth level. James sat quietly in his usual seat, no longer taking notes. Over the past weeks, he had watched his classmates discover truths about his homeworld that he had never considered remarkable. Seeing their reactions had made him realize just how unusual human existence really was in the broader galactic context. Our initial assessment classified humans as an unlikely prey species that had somehow survived through advanced technology and defensive strategies, Professor Velthari continued. This assessment was fundamentally incorrect. She manipulated the display to show human cities, transportation networks, agricultural systems, and industrial centers. Every image demonstrated complete human dominance over their environment. Humans had reshaped entire continents, redirected rivers, leveled mountains, and turned natural wilderness into organized systems that served their purposes. Humans did not survive alongside Earth's predators, the professor stated. Humans conquered them so completely that they now keep the most dangerous ones as entertainment for their children. Crixtal raised a trembling appendage. Professor, if humans achieved such dominance over creatures that we classify as planet-ending threats, what does that indicate about human capabilities compared to other Federation species? The question hung in the air like a dangerous chemical that no one wanted to handle directly. Professor Velthari consulted her data tablet, though she clearly already knew the answer. According to our analysis, humans rank as the most efficient predator species ever documented in Federation records, she replied carefully. They have successfully eliminated competing predators on their world not through individual combat, but through systematic species-level warfare that lasted thousands of years. The alien students processed this information with growing alarm. They had learned that humans did not simply coexist with dangerous animals but had fought and won a planet-wide conflict against every creature that could threaten them. The tigers, bears, sharks, and wolves that humans now kept as pets were the descendants of species that had lost an evolutionary war against humanity. The implications are concerning, added Dr. Kethmore, one of the senior faculty observers. If humans consider apex predators suitable as children's companions, we must reconsider our threat assessment protocols for the species itself. James finally spoke up, knowing that continued silence might raise suspicions about his background. Professor, perhaps the key factor is that humans evolved as persistence hunters. They succeeded not through strength or speed, but through endurance and intelligence. Explain, Professor Velthari requested. Human ancestors could track prey across vast distances for days or weeks until the target collapsed from exhaustion, James said, drawing on knowledge from his high school anthropology classes. No other species could match their combination of endurance, tool use, and group coordination. This explanation terrified the alien students more than all their previous discoveries combined. The idea of predators that never stopped pursuing their targets, that could think strategically and work together indefinitely, represented a type of threat they had never imagined. Quinere wrapped her wings around herself protectively. Are you suggesting that humans hunted other apex predators to extinction through persistent pursuit? Not extinction, James corrected. Dominance. Humans kept the ones they found useful and eliminated those they did not need. Professor Velthari displayed the final piece of evidence that would change galactic policy toward Earth. It was a simple image from a human family's social media account, showing two small children playing in a backyard while three large dogs supervised their activities. The dogs were clearly alert and protective, scanning the environment for potential threats to the human youngsters. This image represents the ultimate expression of predator dominance, Professor Velthari explained. Humans have trained apex predators to guard their most vulnerable members. The predators have been so thoroughly conquered that they now serve as soldiers in the human family structure. The room fell silent as everyone absorbed the implications. Humans had not simply survived their dangerous world. They had restructured its entire ecosystem around their needs, turning former competitors into willing servants who would die to protect human children. Dr. Kethmore stood up from his observer seat. This session is concluded. All findings will be classified under Federation Security Protocol 7. Students, you are not to discuss these discoveries outside this room. As the alien students filed out, many would later request transfers to safer fields like botanical studies or mineral analysis. Professor Velthari remained behind to complete her final report to the Galactic Council. That evening, Earth was quietly reclassified as a Type X death world, and humanity was moved to the Federation's extreme diplomatic caution list. The report's final recommendation, written in Professor Velthari's precise academic language, simply stated, species demonstrates casual dominance over planetary apex predators. Recommend non-aggression treaty and respectful distance. James walked back to his dormitory, wondering if he should mention to his parents that he had accidentally terrified an entire alien university simply by existing.